Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Before we start with our today's session, an announcement. The third and the final step of the Marathon UPSC Civil Service examination is the interview. It was scheduled to be conducted from April 26, 2021, but because of the spike of the COVID cases and also because of lockdowns imposed, UPSC had suspended the interview program which was scheduled from April 26. It has now issued a notification. As per this notification, the Civil Services Personality Test will be held from 2nd of August 2021. The e-summons letter will be made available shortly on the UPSC website and one would be able to access it. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says the promise and perils of digital justice delivery. There is a popular saying in the judicial system that justice delayed is justice denied. This is so true when it comes to the Indian judiciary as well. Why? Let's look into the statistics. According to data released by the Supreme Court in June 2020, newsletter of the E-Committee, 3.27 crore cases are pending before the Indian courts, of which 85,000 have been pending for over 30 years. This means, as the very statistics denote, justice is getting delayed, and if it is delayed, it ultimately means justice is denied. In order to overcome this shortcoming, what we require is the information and communication technology. So the article here is speaking about adapting and importing technology into the path of judicial reform. So what are the steps taken by the government of India along with the judiciary? How is it going to impact the Indian judicial system, and what are the major challenges when it comes to the phase 3 of the technology adaptation is what is this article all about. Let us try and understand what is the author trying to convey. We have one of the important projects called as the e-Coach project. What is this e-Coach project? This is an initiative of the Government of India under Department of Justice, Ministry of Law and Justice, whose basic idea and vision is to transform the Indian judiciary by importing the technology into the roots of the judicial system. So what are the major objectives of this e-Coach project? This has to provide efficient and time-bound citizen-centric services. As of now, there is undue delay, procrastination that takes place when it comes to this particular issue. There is tardy approach in the judiciary. This leads to a lot number of cases piling up every year as well. Ultimately, as we initially discussed, justice delayed is justice denied. To prevent this, use of technology for the efficient and time-bound categorization of the courts and giving judgments as per the due process of law is one of the objective of this e-Coach project. Followed by this, it will develop, install and implement all the decision support systems in the court. It will automate all the processes to enhance the transparency in accessibility of information and ultimately increase the judicial productivity. So the judicial productivity is on the basis of quality and it is also on the basis of quantity as well. On one side, it is not just about passing of judgments, but it should also be right justice delivered to the right person. Added to this, the number of cases over a period of time will also have to be increased, so the quality and quantity with respect to judicial productivity is kept a check, and justice delivery with system affordability, accessibility, cost effectiveness, predictability and transparency is enabled by the import of technology when it comes to the e-Coach project. So the basic idea of e-Coach project is to provide all the stakeholders, that is the litigants, the lawyers, the judiciary in itself, so that they can leverage information, communication technology for improving justice delivery to the people of India. This is what is the objective of the e-Coach project. This will be implemented in phases. The first phase was started in the year 2007. So this particular project, which started from the year 2007, wanted to ensure that there is computerization of all the district courts in India. So this is what is called as phase 1. So this particular e-Coach project has 3 phases. The first phase is about computerization of the district courts. Followed by this, we have the phase 2 of the project. This lays emphasis on the service delivery to the litigants, lawyers and other stakeholders, which is the judiciary in itself. What does it want to do? Basically, as of now, whenever you have to access a particular case, it becomes very difficult. The stakeholders in a particular case will not be able to understand, get information on time. They may have to physically visit the court as well. In order to remove this e-coach project enables to a larger extent that information will be available on the technological platform and at the same time in the local languages wherever they are. So what is the major issue? Accessing information is now going to get easy as it is enabled on a technology platform. The applications for mobile phones, SMS and emails are also being employed as well. Kiosks are being set up in the court complexes as well. In case they want certified copies of the documents with respect to their cases, the same is provided by the court of law after they pay the payment as well. So for this particular payment, they have also provided what is called as the digital gateway for getting all these certifications. So the phase 1 and phase 2 basically deal with digitization of the judiciary, e-filing, tracking cases online, uploading judgments online, so on and so forth. So all this has taken place in the phase 1 as well as in the phase 2. Now what we have is the phase 3 in the making. So there is a particular draft that has been released and this is called phase 3 of the e-coach project. What is this phase 3 all about? This was recently released as a draft vision document for the phase 3 projects. This particular information of phase 3 has two core projects. One is accessibility, the other is to ensure that every segment of the society is included under the phase 3 project. What do we mean by it? Let's try and understand. This can be broken down into three segments. One is the installation of the relevant hardware. Second is to create the digital infrastructure. Third is to enable access to the critical services. What is the first step of phase 1? That is installation of relevant hardware. So the basic hardware needed across the courts to ensure the digital services are provided is done under the phase 1. That is reliable connectivity, internet provisions, power supply. That is the second provision. And the third is other relevant like the computers, printers and scanners. This is the most important part when it comes to phase 1. We already have it under phase 1. We have already established under phase 2. And if there are courts that do not have these provisions, make sure that these are provided under phase 3 as step 1. That happens to be the first part. The second part is to create the digital infrastructure. What is this digital infrastructure? First is we need to have a digital case registry. What is this digital case registry? Let me give you an example. There are a number of cases that get piled up in the court of law. It has its own case numbers as well. It has its own format of cases as well. So when it comes to the physical copy, you would be able to take it from a shelf and give it to that particular person. But this has to be digitized as well. This will also have to be provided a particular format and a code as well. So on the basis of states, on the basis at the national level, a perfect format is given. So this registry will ensure that a particular case number is picked and all the reasonable judgments and codes with respect to that case is given. So the digital case registry will have a unique case locator linked to every case through the data standards that have been established. Followed by this, a comprehensive and updated repository of case law is part of this digital infrastructure, which will ensure that freely accessible aggregator of indexed case laws with appropriate standards and specifications are given under the second platform. Then it will make the documents machine readable and secure, which means to say that they will be smart and in the DMAT format. What is this DMAT format? That is dematerialized. There is no physical copy of it. Everything is digital in nature. So you want to access from anywhere with internet supply at your disposal, you would be able to access this dematerialized form. So everything that is dematerialized can be read by the system, and ultimately this will also have all the securities like the digital signatures, blockchain, to ensure authentication and the security. Followed by this, we will have intelligent scheduling, where artificial intelligence will be used for optimizing and coordinating the schedules and times of different actors. So what will it do? As of now, whenever there is a particular case that has to be heard, what you require is a scheduling. This scheduling as of now is very haphazard. Sometimes it is also said we don't know whether there will be a hearing in the court of law as well. In order to remove this, artificial intelligence will be used, for which there will be a proper scheduling with respect to a case. Then what we will have is the judicial documents, including orders and judgments, which can also be translated to other languages. And finally, and pay heed to this, it is called as the interoperable criminal justice system. What is it? It enables sharing of data between police, prison, legal aid courts, etc. by developing data standards, specifications, protocols, and certifications. So what is this interoperable justice system? It means that the data which is localized in nature, the data which is picked up by the judiciary or the legal systems in India, can also be transmitted to other institutions in India. So the other institutions include the police, the prison, and other legal aid mechanisms. So the data that is collected in the localized form by the judiciary can also be transferred to other institutions in India. That is what is called as interoperable criminal justice system. All this is part of the second leg when it comes to the phase 3 of the eCoach project. Finally, what we will have is the third step of the phase 3, which includes digital case management system, where access to the information can be done by lawyers, clients, registry, and judges. This also includes e-filing of the cases, open digital hearings, transcriptions that need to be provided for the stakeholders will be provided under this, service of notice, which enables automatic enabled service on parties via the email and SMS. Then we will have remote digital assistance. In case of any difficulties, a number would be given where the litigants can call up and find out information about their cases. Administration of legal aid, which enables more equitable and efficient allotment of cases to the legal aid lawyers, aided by data analysis. Finally, what we will have is the virtual courts, which will enable settling of cases like the compounding of offences, or small cause money claims, or mutual consent divorce pleas, so that ultimately there is no delay when it comes to the judicial system in India. So the phase 3 of the eCoach project has these 3 steps, where core values of trust, empathy, and transparency is enabled, and it also wants to simplify the procedures so that we can maximize the positives of technology and minimize the risk that are associated with technology. However, this article currently goes on to say that there are challenges with respect to this phase 3. Why? That is because there is something called as the ecosystems approach that is enabled under this draft. What is this ecosystems approach? Let us try and understand with this particular diagram. First, what this article speaks about is in reference to the automation of technology. What is this automation? This happens to be installation of hardware infrastructure, development of web-based applications, digitization of judicial records. There is no problem with respect to the automation. Followed by this, it speaks about building systems, which includes creation of linkages between judicial systems and other institutions, development of monolithic services and capabilities for ease of use across the users, and basic data analytics, which happens to be part of the system that will be created as part of technology development. But the author here speaks about challenges when it comes to the ecosystem. What is this ecosystem approach? Where there will be an interoperable digital infrastructure which allows for the unified modified evolutionary system. So what will happen under this? Let's say the data which is collected by the courts in India from the lower judiciary to the upper judiciary. So this data will be in the localized form. This data will be with the judiciary. But what is happening here? There is interoperability. As we initially discussed, this data which is localized will become centralized, and it may come under the vision of the Home Ministry as well. If it does come under the vision or under the control of the Home Ministry, it is being said that this may come under the surveillance state. As of now, most of the data of judiciary is localized in nature. If it becomes centralized, if it goes to the other authorities or the legal institutional machineries, in such a case the data becomes centralized, and in such a case the government will start surveillance on its people, which also means it is violating the privacy principle as well. So the article here goes on to say that this whole localization to the centralization of data may create surveillance state, and ultimately this would mean that there is also privacy which is getting violated, and the Puttaswamy judgment which was given by the Supreme Court of India is getting violated, says this article. Added to this, the author goes on to say that this idea of improvising on the technology ideally should be inclusive, but there might be circumstances where interoperability may exacerbate the existing class and the caste inequalities when it comes to data centralization, says this article. So what is that the government will have to do? What is that the judiciary will have to do going forward? They have to abandon this ecosystem approach where there is interoperability. Ideally, they have to streamline the judicial process, reduce the pendency, help the litigants. All this is part of the technology adaptation, but this whole process of centralization of the data instead of localization of the data can ultimately breach or bring about a surveillance state or a centralized system, breaching the very edifice of privacy, says this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says government officials targeted in phishing attempt. What is the context? Several government offices, including Defense Ministry officials, were targeted by a malicious web link sent on WhatsApp and SMS asking them to update their vaccination status. So this article here is speaking about two security concepts. One is what is called as phishing. The other is what is called as smishing. Let me explain what is this concept of phishing with the help of an example. Let's say you have your email and there are thousands of mails that you get every single day. By mistake, you don't realize that there is one of the mails that has come to your inbox which looks exactly as it is sent from the authenticated sources. There might be an email from Facebook, or it might be from your college, or it might be from the organization, or it might be from anyone whom you think is the legitimate source or the authenticate source. So what do? You have the email that comes to your email ID, and ultimately what do? You click on this particular link. So this particular link, the minute you click on it, it takes you to a web page. So this particular web page will have an address and the layout will also be present. So when you look into this particular page, it looks entirely exactly like the original website. Let's say you have been given a link from Facebook, so you go to that particular link of Facebook. So the minute you see this particular page, it is an exact replica, but the point to be noted, it is not the original or the exact Facebook, but instead it is a replica. So when you click on this replica, which is not an authenticate source, which is not a legitimate source, and you go on to give your user ID and your password, that particular person could steal the information. So what is happening under phishing? Under the phishing, you would be directed to a particular website. This website will look entirely like an authenticate website, but it is not. So you give away your information in the form of ID and password, and that particular person may steal your information as well. So at the individual level, what would happen? Let's say there is an hacker who sent you one of the links to SBI, or let's say ICICI, or let's say HDFC. So what do? You think that it is an authenticate banking source, so you give your credentials, but unfortunately this is not a genuine website. So the hacker will take your information, can get into the actual website of that particular banking channel, and he may transfer funds to his account. This is one of the things that can happen. Similarly, it can also happen at the organizational level as well. Let's say, for example, at the organizational level, it can be one of the IT companies as well. There might be a person who might have sent you an email. You might have entered and given the credentials as well. This might also import a worm or a virus into your system. It can also breach the security of the organization, and ultimately it can cause damage to the systems as well as the server of the organization. Similarly, it can also be a problem to the defense personnel as well as the security agents. Let's say there is a person who is working with the government of India, he is working with HAL, or he is working with the defense ministry. There might be sensitive information, so this person unknowingly might reveal the information, which can be a security breach. So on all the three fronts, on the individual level, on the organization level, and also on the security front level, this could have larger implications to that particular community. Another important ways of stealing the information is what is called as smishing. What is this smishing? When it comes to phishing, it is about emails. It is about taking you to a particular website. Now, if the same is done via the SMS or via WhatsApp link, that is what is called as smishing. So what is happening in smishing? An SMS is sent, a link is given via the SMS, you happen to click a particular link. This happens to be a malware, this happens to be a suspicious activity link, so this will take you to a particular place. That is what is called as smishing. In phishing, you go to a particular website, and that is through an email, or it can be through other ways as well. But when it comes to smishing, you go through the SMS. That is what is called as smishing. So in the present situation, there was an SMS which was sent with an abbreviation MOHFW that expands to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and they try to steal the information of the government officials. When such information is stolen, it can be a security problem to the country. So what could be the implications? So this is basically a fraudulent communication that appear to have come from a reputed source, and it may steal some information, sensitive data like credit card login information, or in fact sometime install the malware on the victim's machine. So in order to overcome this particular issue, number of agencies in India, in fact the government of India has also issued some of the recommendations as well. What are these recommendations? Officials are usually sensitized not to open any of the attachments from unsolicited members. Let's say if you don't know that particular person, if you do not know who that person is or which source the message is from, please do not open these emails is the first recommendation given by the government of India. And it has also said that whenever you're going to an authenticate source, which you see as an authenticate source, make sure that the spelling is correct about this particular website. Added to this, there is something called as the lock symbol when it comes to the authenticate website. So this has to be seen at the left of that particular website, and if this lock symbol is present, it means it is an authenticate website. One, make sure it is spelling is proper, and two, make sure that you do not open mails from unsolicited members or the organization. Apart from this, education and awareness program will have to be given to the members of that particular organization. Simulation exercises will also have to be taken periodically so that employees know how to react to a phishing attack. Apart from that, all the organizations in India, in fact the government agencies as well, will have to comprehensively overview all the security vulnerabilities periodically, says this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says South Asia's healthcare burden. There are a number of cases that are increasing because of COVID-19. There are things to be blamed as well. One is the super spreader events. Then it is because of the negligent physical health infrastructure, citizens not following the protocols, or logistical mismanagement, or with respect to the oxygen demand and supply as well. All this is not because of one single reason, but it is because of many reasons. Not a single stakeholder is to be blamed, but a multi stakeholder is to be blamed in order to overcome this particular issue of health haphazard or the health infrastructure. This article here is speaking about the Lacune areas, and it is recommending an import of the Vietnam model of healthcare infrastructure. Let us try and understand what are the various issues and challenges when it comes to South Asian countries and its health infrastructure. First up, this article says that India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and many other South Asian countries have subpower public healthcare system. What do we mean by it? When you look at multiple sectors in India, let's say for example defense spending, most of the countries like India, Pakistan, in fact Bangladesh as well, have exorbitant spending when it comes to the defense sector. But when it comes to the healthcare sector, it is completely poor, it is completely abysmal, and is not meeting the standards as set by the developed countries, which means there is subpower public healthcare system that is existing in all these South Asian countries. Added to this, there is a problems with respect to the availability of the doctors and the number of doctors as well. When it comes to India, we have clear division, that is the urban and the rural divide. When it comes to the urban areas, or in fact private practitioners of the hospitals, there are enough number of doctors. But when it comes to doctors who are practicing in the public department or the hospitals run by the government, which is public hospitals, there are very less doctors, says this article. Basically, there are about 0.08 doctors, but ideal ratio should have been 1 for 1000. So it means India does not have enough doctors who are working at the public level at the government hospital, says this article. This not only with respect to India, the same is also present in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and multiple South Asian countries. Now when it comes to the beds in India, there is only half a bed available for every 1000 people. Again, this is a sign of distress, this is a sign of non-availability of beds. As a result, it means people are the major sufferers. In number of cities and regions in India, what we are actually witnessing is that COVID patients are asked and treated on the hospital floors. There are patients who have to walk hundreds and thousands of miles as well just to get a hospital. There are people who are not able to get oxygen demand and supplies as well. And at the same time, there are many people who are also treated not by the doctors who are having all the qualifications, but instead they are treated by the quacks in India as well as in other South Asian countries as well. All this is because there is subpower public healthcare system. So what should the government do? The government, in order to overcome this particular issue, has to import one of the models called as the Vietnam model. What is this Vietnam model? This is also seen as an healthcare policy from the Southeast Asia as well. What is this healthcare model? When you look into the Vietnam model, Vietnam has invested in a publicly financed healthcare system from the 1920s. So the Vietnam has given much more importance to healthcare. The Communist Party of Vietnam has made a commitment to the healthcare sector reforms, and at the same time, Vietnam has an active and responsible public sector healthcare system that prioritizes primary healthcare. This model will have to be imported to South Asian countries, says this article. Added to this, a similar model is also present in Laos. It is also present in Cambodia. So a model which is famous in Vietnam has been exported to Laos and to Cambodia. So this model has to be imported to South Asian countries, says this article. So going forward, we can anticipate the third wave of COVID-19. So during that particular period, India has to ensure that there is proper public health infrastructure, for which what we require is more political funding, a vision for a longer term perspective, a political commitment irrespective of the political ideology, and what we can do is to heal the wound of COVID-19, says this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says the murky space of social audio. The article here is speaking about one of the applications called as Clubhouse. You need not have to know about the entire functioning of this Clubhouse, but to give you a brief idea, what is this Clubhouse? This is just like any other social media applications. We have WhatsApp, we have Telegram, we have Facebook, we have Instagram. A similar social application is what is this Clubhouse. How does this work? When you speak about WhatsApp, what can you do? You can share images, you can send voice messages, you can also interact, you can send videos, so on and so forth. When you look at Facebook or Instagram, what can you do? You can upload videos, you can bring up reels as well, you can put out status as well. All this is available on Facebook and Instagram. Similarly, you have other platforms as well like Twitter. So a similar platform is what is called as Clubhouse, where you would not be able to send text messages, you would not be able to send images, but instead what you can do is to send audio clips in this particular platform. So this particular platform basically enables only audio clips where you would be able to send a voice note on this particular platform. But what is this all about? Why are we discussing this? That is because this has some security issues. As of now, we have the traditional social media platforms, which we just discussed. WhatsApp, where WhatsApp is already in a tug of war with the government of India. Then there is Facebook and Instagram, which already has number of issues in itself. Now a new application has come, which could also be another security issue. What are the security issues? As of now, the very nature of this application means that there is violation of the privacy and security. How? Let's say, for example, I joined Clubhouse. Let's say I am an iOS user, or this is also off late given to the Android as well. So I happen to join one of the groups, let's say a Clubhouse, or I can join a particular room which it is called so, and in this particular room there can be anonymous people as well. So what do? We interact with each other by sending voice notes. So it means that I am a person whom I don't know. I enter one of the rooms, that is what it is called so, and when I enter, I give the voice out. So this particular application is recording all the conversation. It is not end-to-end encrypted. It is not taking the consent of the user, and it means it is saving all the files. That means it is going to be a violation of the privacy. When it comes to WhatsApp, what you have is end-to-end encryption, where other person would not be able to read it. But in this particular case, it is not end-to-end encrypted. Consent of the user is not taken, but a voice out is saved by this application, violating the privacy and security of the person. So the minute this person enters the so-called rooms or the Clubhouse, it may lead to cyberbullying and trolling. This might also lead to sexism and racism as well. Sometimes it can also instigate the crowd and ultimately throw passions of communalism as well. And this can also damage whatever is the social fabric in the society. This particular application also violates the General Data Protection Regulation of the Europe, and the major drawback of this application is the possibility of the Chinese government accessing the raw audio. How? One of the parts of this application is written by a Chinese startup called as Agero, and we all know for the fact that if it is a private company, it does not matter. All the China machinery is in such a way that the private agencies or a company may have to give out information to the government, and if this information is given, the central government of China is keeping a constant touch about people and their interactions as well. Finally, the article goes on to say that the person using this application will also have to give permission to the application for accessing the user contact as well. So a person who is not even involved, his contact is given to the application, which means the privacy of another individual who is not using this application is also getting violated. So the article goes on to say that India needs to come up with data protection laws. As of now, privacy is getting violated, and in in the near future, whenever innovation is made, it has to strike a balance with respect to privacy, security, and data rights, says this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. Information and communication technologies enablement of the Indian judicial system gives us a rare opportunity to transform the legal system. Comment. Also highlight some of the challenges with the implementation of ecosystem approach. Next question. The rise of phishing attack poses a significant threat to individuals, organizations, and security apparatus. Discuss. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.